According to Google, War Thunder has over 2,500 vehicles, but of those 2,500, which are the worst? Better still, which are the most overrated? Today we will look at what are, in my opinion, the most overrated tanks in the game. I just want to point out that these are not the worst tanks in the game, but simply the ones that don't deserve so much hype. To make this video, I used the patent-pending Overrated Scale. The way the scale works is that you give each tank a hype and power scale from 1 to 10, then divide the hype scale by the power scale and voila! Quick note that I'm only doing tech tree vehicles in this video. Premiums will be for another video. If you disagree with any of the choices in this video, put them in the comments below. Now let's get into the video. America. Yep, we are starting off with a Sherman. The Jumbo is essentially an up-armoured version of the original M4A2 Sherman, and like most of the other American Shermans, the Jumbo was once extremely strong when it used to be in 5.3, however after it was nerfed to 6.3 its invincible armour became weak and vulnerable. While it does have a powerful 76mm M1 cannon, it doesn't stand out at all when compared to King Tigers and IS-2s. The whole point of the Jumbo Sherman was its armour, and with that gone it's not really good at anything, and there is no point of playing it. On the scale, I give it a 5 for hype, since it's still pretty loved by most American mains. For power, I give it a 3. It might seem harsh, but you must remember it's in 6.3. That gives the Sherman Jumbo an overrated score of 1.7. I know Germany is up next, but my pick for Germany is actually pretty controversial, so I'm going to save it for the last one. Now, let's move on to Russia. I can already sense the confusion, but how can the IS-3 be overrated? Listen, the armour is great, but there is no situation where this is the best tank to have. On urban maps, a 20-second reload, and that is after you've aced the crew. But that's fine, heavy tanks were never meant to be good at urban maps anyway. What about sniper maps? No, classic Soviet 3 degrees of gun depression. At 7.3, the lower plate will easily be penetrated by almost any tank, and it is an instant death. So, what is this tank good at? Well, really nothing. Not when there are better alternatives like the T-44-100 and ZSU-57. For hype, I give it a solid 7, since it is highly regarded by Russian mains for its tanky armour. For power, I give it a 4. Although it is not a reliable tank, there are times when it can work well. That gives the IS-3 an overrated score of 1.75. Now onto the United Kingdom. Although technically a South African vehicle, it's in the UK tech tree, so they take responsibility for this thing. This might be the first tank in the video that no one is surprised about. It sucks. At 6.3 you get no armour, a pitiful gun with a relatively slow reload, and the fact that it has an enormous size, yet it is still considered a light tank. Although there is not very much love for this vehicle, it is still one of the worst in the entire British tech tree in my opinion. The most overrated because it is simply not useful in any situation, not over other options at the same rank like the Charioteer or Centurion. For hype it gets a 3 because there is actually very few people who defend this vehicle, and for power it gets a 1 because it is simply not going to bring anything to your lineup. That gives the Ratel 90 an overrated score of 3. Next up, Japan. The Type 60 ATM is one of the last tanks of its battle rating to have manually guided missiles, along with the Zaklam Tiger in Israel. These missiles are a pain to guide, and you only get 6 of them. That, plus a 10-second reload rate, just destroys this tank as it has no other deadly armament to speak of. I know many of you are wondering why I didn't choose one of the low-tier Japanese tanks. It's because while a lot of them are not great, none of them are overrated like the Type 60, which I think is overrated because of the large number of players who use it. This is mainly because missile carriers attract newer players grinding through the tech tree for the first time, but the Type 60 simply isn't worth it. For hype, I give it a 4, and for power a 3, since the missile is still powerful when they hit the target. That gives the Type 60 an overrated score of 1.3. Now on to China. Although it is decent on paper and you see a fair amount of people using it in-game, the Type 63 is actually horrific in 6.3. Although having satisfactory mobility for a light tank, It has almost an exact replica in 5.0 as the Object 211, with the only major difference being that the Object 211 lacks the heat FS that the Type 63 has. The problem with this is that the 85mm heat FS that the Type 63 has is terrible, and not worth the steep 6.3 battle rating. Also, the Type 63 has another sibling in the ZTS 63 and 7.7, which is also far better than the Type 63 because it carries APFSDS and a laser rangefinder. Overall, the Type 63 is just an outlier in between the Object 211 and ZTS 63, and doesn't live up to the hype at all. For hype, it gets a 7 because I see it all the time in 6.3, and for power it gets a 3, since there are simply better alternatives out there in both BR ranges. That gives the Type 63 an overrated score of 2.3. Now it's Italy's turn. This is gonna annoy a lot of people, but for the sake of the video I have to do it, because it is overhyped. The L3 is a terrible tank, having only a 20mm autocannon with a 38mm of max penetration. There is also zero armor that can be penetrated by 50 cals. Although this tank is legendary in the War Thunder community for its meme potential and tiny size, it is still technically overrated, even though I still love it. I'm gonna give it a 10 for hype and a 3 for power, since its size can be exploited even at 1.0. This gives it a 3.3 on the overrated scale. The AMX-13 HOT is essentially a normal AMX-13, except it has the ability to carry 6 HOT missiles. The missiles themselves are very good, but because you can only carry 6, you can't rely on them, which means you have to fall back on the tank's regular 75mm cannon, which is severely lacking behind steep 8.3 battle rating. Considering that the rest of the tank is basically the same to the regular AMX-13 of 7.0, the missiles simply don't help it enough at 8.3, and it suffers a lot of the time. Also, mid-tier France is unbelievably powerful, and the AMX-13 HOT sticks out as a bit of an outlier. Overall, the AMX-13 HOT gets a hype scale of 5 and a power scale of 3, since the missiles are simply not enough to defend against the high battle rating, giving the AMX-13 HOT a final score of 1.7. The same score as the Sherman Jumbo. The annoying thing about Sweden is that they don't really have any overrated tanks. Eventually though I settled on the IKV 103 at 4.0. The worst thing about this tank is that the opening in the front that can easily allow you to kill the tank's gunner, disabling it in the process, all without you using your main cannon. I know it isn't a great choice, but there really aren't any overrated tanks, or even bad Swedish tanks, so this one has to do. For hype I will give it a 3, and for power a 2, giving it an overall score of 1.5 on the scale, a new low for the video. Many of you probably think that the Zaklam Tiger would be the worst for Israel, but no, the most overrated Israeli tank would have to be the TCM-20, which is an Israeli SPAA unit, and the lowest BR tank in Israel's tech tree. The problem with the TCM-20 is that it sits at 4.3, while the next lowest BR for Israel is 6.0. This of course means that there is no lineup to play this SPAA with, and it is effectively useless as a vehicle. However, it is played more than you would think, as many SPAA players like to research it early. Giving it a 4 for hype and a 1 for power, we get an overrated score of 4, a new record. Now for Germany. It was an extremely controversial pick to find the most overrated German tank, as it is such a popular and diverse tech tree. However, here it is. Yes, the Tiger. No, don't cancel me. I know that the Tiger is good, really good even, but you have to think about this on a bigger scale. The Tiger just isn't as good as people hype it up to be. If you know how to angle it, it can become an absolute powerhouse, but most people don't know how to angle it. 90% of players in Germany 1.5.7 play this tank, and this tank only. Many of them don't know how to play it, and they see it as a perfect blend of power and armor, and they research it. I'm not saying Tiger players are bad, I'm just saying that there are so many of them and that you get quite a range of skill levels. All for a tank that simply isn't as good as people make it seem. For hype, it easily gets a 10, it's basically the face of War Thunder. And for power, it gets a 5. Because it's so popular, so many players know how to counter it, even when angled, which reduces its overall power. This finally gives the Tiger an overrated scale of 2 to end off the video. If you watched until the end, thank you so much for watching. It genuinely means so much that you would choose to watch my video over others, and I thank you tons. Bye!